Dear colleagues, Wolin belongs to a number of early urban central places along the southwestern Baltic coast, concentrated in the Polabian area. What are the similarities and the differences in the urbanization model represented in this way? Please the next, or I can make it on my own as I assume. Yeah. Let us first take a look at the maritime trading centers in Western Pomerania or Cispomerania, Vorpommern and Mecklenburg. This means Groß-Strönkendorf, Rostock-Dierkow, Ralswiek on the island of Rügen, as well as Menzlin. You see here, some of these places. One moment, the area where I compare, where I speak about and compare with Wolin in the northwestern Slavic territory, and here these places I mentioned, and also some of the places which are probably to compare. For example, Usedom, there is not quite clear, but probably there have been also such an emporium. From the first decades of the 8th century onwards, stable and permanent settlements developed at base or river mouths, which were characterized by particular size and building density, numerous and multi-ethnic, above all Slavic and Scandinavian populations, harbors, diverse and high-level crafts, and extensive trade connections. You see here only, I can't go too intensively in the details, but you can see here the famous Viking graves of Menzlin. You see here, reconstruction of a harbor, also oriented on the Menzlin side. This is here well-known aerial view of Groß-Strönkendorf, probably Rerik, mentioned in the written sources, where we have the harbor bay more or less under the sea today, with the channel going to this harbor area. And here this is a hoard from Rostock-Dierkow, showing directly the strong Scandinavian impacts here, because I have not to explain here, but you see these are things with Scandinavian connections. And there are much more, only to, I can't go in the details, you see it on your own. These are typical, mainly Scandinavian, but also Iro-Scottish dress ornaments and fibulae and so on, which are very common in these places. Oriental coins, in particular, show that these places were integrated into a globalized trade network, the object of which was above all the slave trade. At least is this a plausible hypothesis to explain the hundred thousands of coins which we found in the Baltic Sea area coming from the Oriental or Islamic world. You see here well-known find from Ralswiek, one of the largest, with 2,200 of these coins. And on the right, younger find near Menzlin in Görke. These finds here, these were 150 buried around 830 or a little earlier. Or here you see more, especially since metal detectoring have been became common in Mecklenburg, Pomerania, also Brandenburg. We find steadily new finds, small and larger coin hoards, but also single coins. Here you have some examples. The settlements are, and this is this way from the Varangians to the Greek, which was the, let's say, basis of this influx or this large amounts of Oriental silver going from the Baltic Sea to Stara Ladoga, and then on the rivers of the east to the towns, the trading posts in the Volga, Bulgar, and Khazarian area, and also to Constantinople, Byzantium, what you see here. The settlements are always unfortified, which is surprising and should underline the Scandinavian initiative for the founding of these settlements, because in the north, the building of strongholds does not play a prominent role for rulership and military matters and, let's say, ruling representation. Since the ring forts of the Slavic great lordships, excuse me, here you have also one only impression to remember on this point for this mentioned Slavic slave trade with Slavic people, here in a little too romantic impression. In reality, this was not romantic, but a very brutal and cruel thing, the slave trade, as you know and can assume. We have in these places also some direct archaeological record for this slave trade. This is, for example, Ralsvik on the island of Rügen, where in a beach area, it is marked here red, you can see it here, there have been found many bones of human bones. And there are several interpretations for this feature, that it could be some religious Celtic backgrounds, that there could have been some attack, some small battle or something like that. But from my point of view, the most plausible interpretation is that we have here a place connected directly with the slave trade. Back to the last point. Since the ring forts of the Slavic great lordships, which were built from the middle of the 8th century onwards, kept their distance from the sea trading posts, they were usually 5 to 10 kilometers away of the emporia, there is much to suggest that the inhabitants of the sea trading posts were largely politically independent of the local tribal powers. You see here, only also can't go into details, but this typical strongholds, we call them Feldberg strongholds, very often on the mountains, very large. This Rotemühl, what we have here, this has something like 400 or 500 meters in the diameter. They start in the middle of the 8th century, approximately, main time surely the 9th century, and they have, as you can for example see here, this is a typical situation, this is Menzlin Görke Emporium, and the next stronghold nearby this place, this is Grüttow. This is something like you see here, these are 2 kilometers or perhaps 5 kilometers away. And we found in this Grüttow stronghold many dirhams and Frankish elitarian goods and so on, so that we see there was really a connection in trade, perhaps in some taxes and so on, but they did not build the castle directly at this place, from my point and not only from mine. Point of view, it shows that these rulers in the castle, in the stronghold, were not able to control this place intensively. Scandinavian impact, see, Menzlin, a very important place for this, of course. You see here again one of these stone settings, but we have here also another very interesting site. There is a paved way going through the Gminę Valley somewhere here. I think it's this here, this line. And this is not, as usual, built only by wood, but it has such a stone pavement, what is very common in the Scandinavian Scandinavian area. It was built from the late 8th to the first third of the 9th century, and shows, or it is plausible to assume that we have here, some Scandinavian impact. This is the castle of Grytto. Today it is ploughed down and not much to see at this place. And this Menslin, I already emphasized the best parallels for this we have in Lindholm Hoje in northern Jutland. You see here, if you would excavate this Menslin cemetery completely, it would probably look like Lindholm Hoje. So there is surely these connections. Yeah, the presence of the Scandinavian inhabitants is particularly evident in the burial grounds of Menslin, like we see here, in Ralsvik and Groß-Strömkendorf, where we have many connections and parallels to the north. This, for example, a boat grave from Groß-Strömkendorf. Or here, this is Ralsvik, very large black mountains, it's called, and many kurgans, what you can see here, looking very similar to the Scandinavian counterpart in Birka. But here also this, for example, concrete Scandinavian graves. Here you have also a burnt boat in such a kurgan. The heyday of the maritime trading sites was in the second half of the 8th century and throughout the 9th century, which, despite various uncertainties and controversies, also applies to Groß-Strömkendorf, which have been said that it ends at 808, but there have been new metal finds, but also some older metal finds which are showing that this is this 808-9 events were not the end of Groß-Strömkendorf. And also Ralsvik, whose beginnings certainly lies in the 8th century and not, as it is assumed, not before the first decades of the 9th century. In the late 9th and the first half of the 10th century, crisis-ridden developments occurred, which manifested themselves in the decline of the maritime trading centers, but also in the demolition of the large strongholds of the Feldberg type. What was a sign of political upheavals. Instead of these typical Feldberg strongholds, like here Drense, giant stronghold of some 300 meters in the diameter, 10-meter high ramparts, and so on. These were given up in this time, the most of them, and instead of this came this typical small strongholds of 50, 60 meters in the diameter, sometimes 80 or so, but they are quite small. Which are called in at least parts of the Polabian or northwestern Slavic territory as Torno castles, as well as in the deterioration of the pottery, the phasing out of the Feldberg type, and instead of this, the increase of the Menkendorf type. You see here this so-called Meissen porcelain of early history, very well-made ceramics, what we know from second half of 8th to end of 9th, first half of 10th century, showing high development of the crafts. And this is outnumbered, as I already emphasized, by this much quality-reduced ceramics of Menkendorf type since the second half of the 9th century. In that period, Menslin, Groß-Strömkendorf, and Rostock-Dierkow were abandoned, and Ralsvik temporarily lost its urban character. It was not until the late 10th century, excuse me, I had a little fluence. It was not until the late 10th century that there was a renewed economic upswing, evidenced by excellent pottery, numerous treasure finds with hacksilver, and above all, the emergence of new proto-urban central settlements, now no longer only on the coast, but also inland. We see here only some example for this nice hoards, you know them, and then this typical ceramics, which starts in the area of west of the Oder of the Oder since the 960s approximately, coming more and more in the since the 980s, 2000, late Slavic ceramics, spätslawische Keramik. And then here hoards, there are so many new finds, or old finds, discovered by this metal detectoring that it becomes really it's a new epoch in interpretation of this finds. And they are also starting since the 970s, 80s. Yeah, we can really now register or identify this upswing in many aspects of the society and of the economy. Yeah, and here the new kind of proto-urban central settlement. These are still large settlement agglomerations with a lot of crafts and trade, a multi-ethnic population, and now also clear central religious functions. I used here, from my point of view, most beautiful reconstruction from Kołobrzeg, Wczesnośredniowieczne, of course, here in the area, but for example, Usedom looked very similar in this time. However, in contrast to older emporia, their center, the center of this new type of proto-urban settlement, is always an extensive stronghold. One therefore speaks, some, not all scientists, but this is a traditional term in Germany, of castle town, Burgstadt, to express this connection of large stronghold and economic and other proto-urban aspects. Examples are Usedom, Rostock, Petri-Bleiche, successor of Dirko, Götzkow, and Wolgast, only to see very fast. Wolgast here was the stronghold on the, mainly on the today this island here, the later Schlossinsel, and here the suburbs were in the area of the, a little like in Wolin, also here emerged the later location town, legal town, on the same place as this older center. Götzkow here is very typical, the old stronghold, what we see here is now in the periphery of the later town, what emerged in this area. Excuse me, yeah, I forgot. I only showed, but I think you saw what I spoke about, these places here, which are typical castle towns. Usedom, surely one of the most important places of these, the pendant to Wolin, we can say, on the other side of the mouth of the river Oder. You see here, this is the famous Bauhof castle stronghold of more than 400 meters in the diameter. This was the center of this town, or early town, but it was a large agglomeration, from 5 to 6, 7 kilometers in the diameter at this Usedomer See, what was the natural harbor, we can say, you see here again. And this is the castle, this Bauhof, center of it all, with a moat castle, moat and bailey castle in the 1230s built here. And later on, this became absolutely in the periphery, because since 1230-50, here emerged a new town, a legal town on a regular ground plan, but it was not so important, at a minor role compared with this older castle town. And this was is the typical situation that we have there such a break in the geographical development. And we have from the Bauhof not many excavation information, but we have thousands and 10,000s of finds typical for a high developed trading and craft center. You see here, for example, small finds from bone and ivory, walrus ivory and antler. Here, amber, here imported things, Ovruch, spindle whorl, Kievan, clay egg, pisanka, or how you could call it, and other things, stones from Norway, or here glass from glass, and also semi-precious stones, and here metal, melting things, and so on. Yeah, so a very typical material. And also in these places we have still Scandinavian influence, at least I would interpret this nice boat graves, what we know here from Usedom quite a lot, but some single are also here from east of the Oder, from Cedinia is also one or two, but the most are in Scandinavia, and I think this is a Scandinavian impact. But it's not so evident as in the earlier times, in the emporia times. Yeah? Yeah, written records show that these towns were partly under princely rule, partly governed by an elite of merchants, landowners and priests who had independence from the regional princes. Lech Leckiewicz spoke of oligarchic city republics. They had their heyday in the 11th, 12th century and often formed the starting points of further urban development. In all the cases mentioned above, location towns developed alongside the old castle towns, as I showed here with several examples. How does Wolin compare, what we see here? We can refer here to the most recent settlement history by Marian Remkowski. According to Remkowski, the starting point of Wolin was not very large settlement that developed in the late 8th century in the area of the later Old Town, which is regarded as a settlement preceding the formation of craft and trade settlements due to the rather low evidence of crafts and imports. It was not until the second half of the 9th century that the early urban settlement emerged, which from then on developed continuously until the late 11th century. From above 900 onwards, it had a low rampart with a palisade, an unusual structure for the Slavic environment, but similar to Viking trading posts such as Birka or Haitabu. Also, comp making had already taken place in the second half of the 9th century, and thus is a craft typical of economic centers. I give a citation, a clear intensification of the economic development of Wolin, visible through, for example, the intensification of craft production, in particular glass, amber and horn making, and the inflow of a large amount of silver took place around the mid-10th century. It was only then that a regular rampart was built. These factors show that in the second half of the 10th century, a central town of the type of the late Slavic castle town developed in Wolin. This experienced a temporary decline around 1100 due to crisis in the Baltic trade network and the strengthening of Pomeranian ducal power. Archaeological finds, however, continue to document lively economic life and a strong, now even two-part fortification. In the 1120s, as Otto von Bamberg's biographies attest, Wolin was a powerful city republic. Largely independent of Duke Wartislav I. The town of Wolin was also a center of the Pomeranian economy. Later, a ducal town typical of late Slavic Pomerania developed, followed by a legal town in the 13th century. We are familiar with such multi-phase developments of central towns in Pomerania, as I showed you with several examples here. They were usually accompanied, and this I showed, by small-scale relocations of the settlement centers. In Wolin, however, the entire development took place in one, or more or less in one place. Where do we recognize simultaneous, where special developments between Wolin and the urbanization model of the Polabian area? Wolin had its heyday from the late 10th to the 11th century. This means it was a typical late Slavic castle town whose outstanding position is reflected in the Vinita and Jomsburg traditions. In this respect, Wolin can be compared very well with Usedom or Rostock Petri Bleiche and some other of these places. The size, the agglomeration character, crafts and trade, the fortifications. In the case of Wolin, the independence of the town from the Pomeranian prince becomes particularly clear in written sources, whereas most Polabian castle towns were also seats of the princes and were probably heavily dependent on them. Yeah, only in Wolin, it's not necessary to show many pictures of Wolin, only here to remember, yeah, this is very, a little like in Usedom, very large agglomeration. The harbor we have here, this is from the older excavations since the 30s, yeah, from Wilde and Kunkel. Here we have some of the iconic finds and pictures of the excavation of Professor Filip Powiak here since 70 years or so. Galgenberg, comparable to Ralswiek, Schwarze Berge, this Górze Wyzielcowe, or how is it called, Popolsku, and also with Scandinavian impact, but not very rich finds have been there. Here in the old town, this is from the older excavations by Wilde, you see with these great boats. I think the excavations by Professor Janowski have been also such a boat again, yeah, that they used here such parts of boats for building, showing the maritime impact. Yeah, and then here also from the older excavations, finds with many Scandinavian impact. It is really an outstanding material. It's no question that this place was one of the most, or perhaps the most important in this time from all aspects. Really too from the ceramics, yeah, such beautiful ceramics, it's difficult to find in this area. Yeah, so there's only some impressions from here. But was there, coming back to the main question, I'm coming to the end in 3 minutes, something like that. This was nearly the last picture. But was there already a Carolingian maritime trading center, an emporium, as has long been assumed to be the starting point of the town's central development? This seems a little questionable after this last research. In the main phase of the Emporia network in the west of the Baltic, from the second half of the 8th to the 9th century, there would have been a merely modest economic settlement in Wolin. Perhaps, however, for the beginnings of Wolin's central functions in the 8th century, perhaps we should look to the Silberberg, Silver Mountain, Górze Srebrne, which have been excavated, yeah, also since Wilde and Kunkel, but also by Filip Powiak. And there are some, you know, I think the first oldest dendrochronological date, if I'm right, was something like 808 or so. And there are several old finds. It is the question if really the beginning of Wolin have to be searched in the old town, or if it not could be here in the north of where we are having our conference in the moment. And this place was also densely populated, strongly fortified, economically intensively used area and elevation north of the old town, from which there is also a tree ring date, I said it already, from early 9th century. And to the settlement findings and strongholds of the second half of the 9th and early 10th century recorded in the old town, there's the question if they are really forming the starting point of the early urban development that led to the late Slavic castle town, or do they not rather conclude Wolin's maritime trading center emporium stage? Obviously, there can be no question of a continuous development since approximately 850. Since stronghold construction and economic indicators mark a drastic change in settlement conditions and economy only in the advanced 10th century. To focus on this, the question of this fortifications, what start here already in the in this area in the 9th century. From my point of knowledge, there's no dendrochronological date for it. Yeah, it is dated by finds and so on. And of course, and you emphasized it in your book, it is it's an outstanding situation, because the most of these stronghold of these emporia don't have such a stronghold in such an early time. So I'm not sure. This would be in every case a difference in the development, but I can't say how reliable and sure this dating of these fortifications is. The preceding phase, could well reflect in ceramics and economic legacies a phase of recession that was also recognizable elsewhere in Pomerania at the time. However, according to the state of the art, there was already a first rampart fortification before or around 900, which has, as I said in the small dialogue here, which has no equivalent in the Polabian maritime trading places. In summary, it can be said that Wolin, especially in its late phase, is very comparable with the Polabian castle towns, but that there are still many questions about the early phase as a Carolingian emporium. There was certainly a settlement here, but was there even an emporium from the heyday of the Baltic trade and communication network during the 8th, 9th century? It cannot yet be fully classified in the urbanization model designed for the Polabian region. However, even this model still has many uncertainties, so that mutual comparison is very helpful for understanding the urbanization processes on both sides of the Oder mouth of the Oder, and it should be, of course, intensified. Even more important, however, is that future research in Wolin contributes new insights into the beginnings of the maritime trading center, so that the question of the early period of this most important early urban center on the Slavic Baltic coast comes closer to clarification. Thank you very much.